Welcome to Recovery His Way. I'm your host, Tom Reynolds, and today I'm blessed to have a couple dear friends with me, Barry and Vicki Johnson. We've known each other a good long while, and we've been on a challenging, unique, and journey together. And so I want to kind of talk about that journey. I know it's been a long road the last few years for y'all, and I'm excited that you're here. I know it's something we've talked about doing for a long time. And it was going to take us a while to get ready to do it. And I appreciate the courage that brings you here today, because I know this is a challenging subject, but I think one critically important, not only for us to be able to talk about, but for people to be able to hear about and know that for many, this is a part of the journey in addiction and recovery. And so understanding what that journey looks like is going to be important. So thank you for coming and sharing with us today. So I guess we'll start with your son, Jeffrey, and I want you to kind of, give us some more background on Jeffrey. But he came in April, I think, of I wrote down 2016.
2016.
And completed our 6-month program. And so I want to kind of start with just kind of you sharing a little bit about your journey with Jeffrey, what he kind of went through and kind of what brought him to his way, maybe as a beginning point. So I'll leave it to you.
Well, first of all, I just want to say you have talked with us about this before on different occasions. And just since the first of the year, God has put this on my heart that this is something we needed to do. Mm-hmm. So Jeffrey, he was a blessing to our lives. He's our only child. And even when he was 1 year old, Barry traveled a lot with his job, for 5 years. Mm-hmm. So Jeffrey and I were just together. Mm-hmm. He went everywhere with me, almost everywhere, except work. Ladies, baby showers, whatever. He was there. Luckily, he was a good child, so it wasn't a problem. But we had a lot of good times together, mm-hmm. which I really enjoyed. Then came school and church activities, basketball, baseball, chorus. He actually made all-star chorus for 5 years in a row.
Wow.
He had a good voice. Mm-hmm. Took that after his dad. He was baptized in August. He was like 9.5 years old when he was. Mm-hmm. He grew up good, loving, fun-loving, caring person, a great listener for his friends. Mm-hmm. They've told me.
Right.
So, and to our knowledge, and he did confirm this, that he never really drank through his high school years. Mm-hmm. It started in college. And he was 2 years at Lipscomb, 3 years at Alabama, and he graduated. He was very smart, especially with computers, and so with that, he would get good jobs mm-hmm. because he had that talent.
Right.
He did marry in 2010 to Laura. She's a real sweet girl, and that lasted 4 years. They did part due to his drinking, but it was a hard thing for him. When that happened, we went to Destin, that's where they lived, and we picked Jeffrey up and brought him home. And because he, again, had lost his job due to circumstances as presented. And that's when we found out, Barry got home on Friday with the big truck, moving truck. We got home on Saturday. And that afternoon, I was upstairs just talking to Jeffrey in his bedroom, and he had a seizure. Mm. And I yelled at Barry to come up there, and he did. We called 911. And, of course, by the time they got there, Jeffrey was fine, and he was not going to the hospital. Mm-hmm. You know how they can be. So the paramedics told him, okay, if we get called back to this address, you're going. And so during this time after this, Jeff decided he better be honest with us. Mm-hmm. So he opened up and told us how long he'd been drinking and what all had been going on. And Barry was on his phone looking up withdrawal symptoms from drinking and all that. And
had you no idea that he was drinking, or was it kind of a...
Oh, we had a good idea that he was drinking. Yeah.
But...
No, not to the extent.
Not the way. Right. He had gotten arrested in 2010, right? Like 2 weeks before his wedding.
Okay.
And I was going to let him tell that.
Like for a DUI kind of thing? Or?
Yeah, DUI. And of course, he didn't call us when he got arrested, but when he needed a lawyer, he called us. And so Barry was furious with him. He and Barry had conflicting, because they were so much alike personalities. Mm-hmm. So anyway, So he knew he drank, but he just said, "Oh, this is a one-time fluke," blah, 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 you know, that kind of thing.
Right,
So,
right.
all right,
Yeah.
you know.
It's very common in addiction for people to admit that they have issues, but try to minimize the issue, right? Kind of, I don't want to let you know how bad it is. So if I can just tell you, yeah, I drink some, or, I always talk to guys who are, absolutely blitzed out of their mind and they had 2 beers. That's always the joke. They had 2 beers, just like, because you can't disagree with the fact that they drink,
Right.
but they want to minimize it. So I understand that.
Totally understand
His
that.
trait.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, I was very naive to the whole situation. I didn't drink growing up. I didn't really care to, so it wasn't an issue for me. But I had my eyes open pretty quickly. But anyway, he and Laura, when they divorced in that February 2015, we went and picked him up, and he ended in the hospital. He actually was there for a week, 4 days in ICU, and he almost literally died. He was that bad.
Wow.
He really did. We almost thought we lost him. So, of course, you hear, and counselors was telling us, don't worry. He's a prodigal son. He's hit the bottom of the pit. He's going to, everything's going to be fine now. And that's what I thought. That's what the Bible says. Okay. But, of course, that didn't happen. It was up and down. Him, well, first when we left the hospital, he wanted to go to Bradford. That's where he demanded he was going, so he went. After that, we wanted him to come to his way. He would have nothing to do with that. So he went in and out.
Why was he resistant to coming to his way initially?
I think he thought it was cramming down religious on him.
Okay.
I mean, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, we came with you that March 2015, whenever he was in Bradford, after he got out of the hospital.
Right.
And but he was just, he'd had enough of this Jesus thing through what? Pre-K through 12 at Madison Academy, 2 years at Lipscomb. And so he was very resistant to coming to his way.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So he went to several half houses, and here in Huntsville, in Birmingham. He would want to get away and be around his friends and that kind of thing. But finally, he drank at one of them and got kicked out. So he had to come back home and live, and that was an off and on issue. Was
it? With him drinking and going to say halfway houses or kind of program or something like that, and then getting kicked out and come back home, did that create a lot of conflict for you? Just how do we deal with this? Because that's always a struggle, I think, in families a lot of times, is how do we support without enabling and all that kind of thing. How did you guys navigate that between you?
That's a good question, bringing up that. I was a great enabler. I felt like love, if you love them enough, it's all going to be okay. I really and truly felt that way. And I felt like that's the way we should handle it. Barry, on the other hand, was tough love. And that's the way he felt like. I know.
Tough enough. I continue to pay his car payment, his rent, his insurance, the car insurance, his health insurance.
Enabling.
I can't continue to pay all that. He didn't, it wasn't a quick turnaround, but whenever I finally quit Thanksgiving, we had lunch together in 2015. And at Thanksgiving, I told him at that point we were not going to pay his car payment anymore, or his insurance, or his health insurance. And he just went ballistic. He was just
Couldn't believe it.
that
he would withdraw that from him.
Turn our backs on when he needed us the most. And so,
Right.
That kind of thing, and that went on. He even drove to Hunts. We put after I did that, I even went and filled his car up with gas after that. I don't know why, but
You're really a hard man, aren't you?
so then he decided he was going to go to Nashville for some reason, and so he dropped by the house just to remind us that how mean we were and how unfair and things. So that went on. So that was in after probably in early December when he came by and did this.
Right.
It was chaotic. It was chaos, no doubt about it. It was just from the time he got out of Bradford the first time, he was up and down, and we learned that he would go to AA meetings and leave with somebody and go get something to drink. That's just the way they did things.
Right.
And so it was just chaos at the house all the time.
And he would hide little bottles everywhere. Vodka. That was his drug of choice.
Right.
Drink of choice.
Right.
I know one time we went to Nashville and Jeffrey called and he was mad as heck at us. Barry had changed the locks on the house.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Jeffrey did not like that at all. One thing I will say about Jeffrey, and looking back, and Barry's the one that started this. When Jeffrey was about 11, he asked Barry, what kind of car were we going to get him when he learned to drive? And Barry said, "We're not getting you a car." And Jeff's like, "Well, what am I going to do?" And he said, "We're going to start cutting grass." And Jeffrey literally, along with Barry's help then, because he couldn't drive, started cutting grass, built a business. It was called Jeffrey's Lawn Care Service. I mean, it was a legitimate business. I had to do the records and all that. And he kept at that even through his freshman year. He'd come home at, it was a year-round service that we offered. So he would come home that freshman year, and he helped me cut grass that year too. And I think the next year. So he was a responsible person.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
He would,
And so that's how he got his car, is he cut grass?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
He paid for it. He paid for it and even, paid payments on it. Yeah, he paid it. He loved that car. I don't know how long he kept it until it fell apart. It was a used Pro, and he loved it. He loved it.
Okay.
But anyway, like I said, and I was so caught in the middle because Jeffrey would tell me stuff, and he'd be mad at his dad, and he wouldn't talk to his dad, and then Barry would be furious, and it was just I was a nervous wreck, even during that time, just because being in that position. Then one evening, it hit the fan, and Barry called the police, and it ended up, they told us that someone had to be arrested. If we answer to a domestic call, someone has to be arrested. So they took Jeffrey, and I don't know if I was good in doing this or not. But see, the police officers on the back porch talking to Barry, and one was in there with me and Jeffrey, and they kept asking Jeffrey what happened, and I was just like, I just thought if he didn't talk about his dad and discuss what happened, that they would just let it blow over and they would go away. Well, that didn't happen. They went away and took my child with them. So that's when he had to start going to court, monthly. And the judge, again, he was in some halfway houses during that time. But anyway, the judge, told him, you're going to have to go to a place and to rehab. And you're going to, that's a court requirement. And so we just at that point told Jeffrey, the only place we will, support you with is if you go to his way. So he came here very unwilling.
Well, yeah. Why did you feel so strongly for him to come here from your point of view?
One, I knew you.
Okay.
That's one.
Okay.
I'm very familiar with the program. I'm very familiar how it worked. I had done a lot of research as far as you could do online. And I just, it was in Huntsville, one. Two, it was a Christ-centered program.
Right.
It was more than 90 days. Everything else, it was 90 days.
60 days.
Right.
And that was it. So, my Bradford was 10 to 12 days, unless you send them down to Opelika. There were so many bad programs out there that he found, or that the girl he was with at that time would find, that just did not work. So I wanted him here. This is where I wanted him.
And so he comes in April of 2016, court ordered basically to come.
And I had always prayed.
And parent ordered to come.
Yeah, I had always prayed that Jeffrey would end up in heaven. So my thought is he needs to be in a facility that talks about Christ, Jesus. Even though he's had it all his life, that's where he needs to be. So that was my one reason that I wanted him here.
Right.
Of course, during that time, I was still a nervous wreck because they were not actually talking to each other at that time. I'll say one thing, just talking about Jeffrey. He did build his own faith here. He actually wrote me a full-page letter for Father's Day, and you can see why he did it on Father's Day, probably to get back at his dad. But anyway, it was about how his faith was and how it had grown. And at first I thought, well, no, wait a minute. He's veering off sounds like from my faith. But anyway, I was very happy for him.
Okay.
But
So, yeah, I wanted to kind of talk about having come here resistantly, having kind of moved away from a spiritual faith, obviously, in Christianity, and then coming to a Christ Center program and kind of what that journey was like for him, and then obviously through him for you. I mean, what happened during that? He was here 6 months, right? Mm-hmm. Went through the program at that time, the program was 6 months long. Mm-hmm. So what was that journey like for y'all?
Well, it seemed as though Vicki was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Mm-hmm. He'd been into the program before and left during the middle of the night.
Always some excuse.
Yeah, there's always an excuse.
The best addicts are the best liars and manipulators.
Mm-hmm. Well, we found that.
Well, mine was.
Yeah, no,
I don't know if I should say that.
Speaking from experience.
I shouldn't say that in general, but
Mm-hmm.
he definitely was.
Become very creative. He was very creative. But I think that when Jeffrey came here, I began to settle down a little bit. We've been through a lot, and Jeffrey was here. I think the first 30 days there was no connection with us, no contact or anything. But after that, he was pretty open in contacting. He got a job, which was a good thing.
He would let us come every Sunday and pick him up, and sometimes friends would come to church with him.
Yeah.
So he'd go to church with us.
We began to. I called Daryl one day. I didn't know if it was okay or not, but I called Daryl and asked him if it's okay if I take Jeff to lunch. I mean, he was working, so and of course Daryl was all for that. So Jeff and I began to have lunch about 2 times a week.
Toward the end.
Yeah, toward the end of his stay here. Mm-hmm. And that worked out very good. Jeff and I began to patch up a few things. Okay. We talked about how things were going here. Mm-hmm. We talked about his career and the direction it was taking. He got a fantastic job here. Mm-hmm. That was just unexpected.
With the upcoming.
Yeah, with the up and coming defense contractor,
right. Which is gone.
Which is really big now. Mm-hmm.
And they were very good for him, and they understood. He told them up front because he said they would go after work and go drink, and he'd say, "I can't do that." Mm-hmm. Right. So, because y'all were picking him up.
Right. That's why we do that.
Yeah. Right.
Exactly. And I think that began for Jeff and I. That began to put together a little bit of
finally
of a relationship as we began to mend everything that we've messed up over the last 2 years.
Barry at first really felt like Jeffrey was just going to up and walk away. Mm-hmm. He did not think Jeffrey would stay here.
No, I was working down the street at Trabad, and I expected any day he'd walk in the door. Mm-hmm. Just he walked away from there, walked away from here, walked a mile down the street and walk in. I expected that any day.
Right.
And
talking to Jeff, why do you think? I mean, you expect that had been a track record. Mm-hmm. Do that. Mm-hmm. What do you think kept him from not doing that? Was it just the fact that he felt obligated to the courts at that point? Was it that? What do you think kept him?
I think it was his connection, as he called it, his brothers. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He really felt a bond with the guys here because a lot of them were on the same plane. What happened with them. He was happy to help the guys who couldn't do their Bible lessons because he had so much training in that area. Right. Barry tells a story about when we came to get him on Saturday. But you want to tell that?
Well, he had a pass one Saturday, and it was the cleanup day. It's the big day. I mean, and he just told me that he was going to stay for cleanup, and I could come pick him up after lunch.
He wasn't leave his brothers.
He wouldn't leave here with all the work to do. He would stay here and help.
Okay.
And then he would call us, and that happened on more than one occasion.
A couple of times. Yeah.
So that's the reason I say he felt connected for sure.
Yeah, the community that he got here, the brotherhood that he formed. Still this day, I have the very close friends of his that I still keep in contact with, and still, through telephone calls or or letters or emails or something like that. We still keep in contact.
Right.
Some of Jeff's best friends that he formed here.
Right.
And they were like brothers to him.
And he was a giving person. He, I don't know if it was his roommate, but one of them came from jail, and they didn't even have any underwear. And Jeff told us he gave him some of his underwear. Another one was a huge Cub fan, which Jeffrey loved that. So he shared one of his Cub shirts with him, and we both almost fell over dead because we didn't think he'd dare give that away. So, you know, he saw the need to help others.
Right.
And so I think that was good for him too,
In the community. And I think that's one thing I see here,
even still.
is this brotherhood that's here. Some of these guys are closer to these guys here than they are their own blood brothers.
Right. Right.
So
Absolutely. Well, I think one of the beauties of your story that I really appreciate too is while he was here, how much happened to kind of mend your relationship, particularly with father, son. And I know hearing some of those stories from Jeff as well as from you at different points was really encouraging to see that God was using this time, this season, to be able to heal some of those things was probably pretty significant.
Yeah, there were some significant gashes in our relationship as I tried very hard to hold a real, just I don't know, that's a tough line to keep him. To I set boundaries, and for a year or two, almost a year, I would move. The boundaries were flexible. I kept moving them out as he would mess up or he would go rogue on us and disappear. But then at one point, I finally just set those hard boundaries and did not move from them. And that was very upsetting to Jeff. He's a 37-year-old man. I mean, he did not appreciate his dad telling him where he could be or where he could not be.
Right. Sure. And I know that can be humbling. Unfortunately, substance abuse kind of puts you if you're not trapped in substance abuse, you may not be in a position where you're having to have your dad tell you what to do at that point in life. But unfortunately, with the decisions that have been made and stuff like that, you're kind of dependent still in that situation. Well, so he graduates in October of 2016. I remember that night. I still remember.
Great graduation.
Yeah, having that celebration with Michael Varketta and
Yes.
and
Jeff had a lot of people from church coming.
Right.
And
I think we had it outside. Did we have it at the pavilion that night?
Yeah, sure did.
Yeah. Probably one of the only ones we ever had out there. So that was
Really?
cool. Yeah.
It was good.
It was a packed house on that.
Yeah.
We really enjoyed it. You let the guys go around and tell something about each one, and that meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
I think Jeff's comment, that one of the comments he made that night was that that very point in his life, he felt closer to God than he'd ever felt before. And that was something that, that was a win for me. I think it was a win. For years, we dictated Jeffrey's faith. I mean, he was our son, and just like any parents do, they dictate their children's faith. Right. So it was our faith. Then he went to Lipscomb a couple of years, and it was their faith. Then he kind of just turned his faith off for a while, and just kind of walked away from it. But when he was here, he developed his own personal faith. And I think that's the faith that is consistent and long lasting. Right. Is that when you develop your own personal faith. Right. I think that's what he did when he was here.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times parents struggle feel like they're enforcing Christianity or religion on their children, but that's part of their job at that age. I don't think there's any way you can't do that when you have a child. At some point, how that transfers from your ownership to theirs is always a great challenge. And in some cases, those can go smoothly. In some cases, they can be a little bumpy.
Right. Yeah. Because we both grew up with conservatively and in the religion. So, wow.
Right.
It was a big difference.
Right. So he graduates in October, and I know he kept his job. He had this really good job, and he moved out, got himself an apartment.
Well,
well, actually, his exit plan that he had here, and that was a good one. Y'all helped him put together an exit plan. He had a good exit plan, I thought. Part of that was he was going to move into the house with my sister and her husband. Both their kids were away at college, so.
And they were great for him. Jeffrey loved them too.
Jeffrey loved his cousin, his aunt, and that worked out very well. But Jeffrey just had this insatiable desire to be on his own, to be independent. And so, reluctantly, after 2 weeks maybe living with Tina, my sister, he got an apartment, and we helped him. Oh, I was very reluctant to help him, but I felt like I had to.
We had kept all his furniture in storage all that time, so we just emptied out the storage, and there he got to start again.
Right.
We got all his furniture out and moved him into an apartment.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Jackson helped us.
Now he paid for the apartment. We didn't.
Oh yeah,
did.
was his. Of course, he had a very good job, so he was able to afford that.
And he had an old rickety car, but
They bought a beater and that was good.
Yeah.
That was a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
While he was here, and that was part of the transition plan. He had to have transportation.
Right.
So, very reluctantly, he moved into his apartment.
Okay. So what happened then? I mean, so now, I know we want him to be a little more connected to that, not be so isolated, because that can tend to lead to more addiction issues, right? So staying connected to community was really important.
And guys, and they told us, they tried to get in touch with him.
Mm-hmm.
But Jeff I think when Jeff started drinking again, he just sort of blocked everybody off again, and us included. And that was, in mid-October. Well, his birthday was November 27th. He didn't come for our family get-together.
Thanksgiving was 3-4 days before that.
Thanksgiving.
He didn't show up for that.
That.
He just, secluded, kind of became very reclusive and secretive.
I just think I think that he just was so disappointed in himself, and he just didn't want to go through all the, back and forth with us and all that. So it was actually like 2.5 months after graduation that he left this earth. The coroner and all tells us that it was he probably died on the 23rd or something of December, but we would call him and even go over there and knock on the door, no answer. And sometimes he'd be that way anyway, so you'd just leave. And so finally on the 27th, we were over there and we were determined to get in. And we actually had gotten the door unlocked with a little, I don't know. Anyway, got that unlocked and had a chain lock. And you could just see this much, And Barry went and bought a screwdriver, and we started taking the screws out of the the thing that was connected to the door thing. And there was actually a police lady that lived across the hall from him in his apartment. So she was over there helping us. And anyway, we were down to the last screw, and the Lord did not let that come out. She had gone and talked to the front desk, and they had called the police, and they came and did a wellness check. He was definitely gone. And so I'm just so thankful that the Lord let that screw stay in place, because we would have walked in on him. That would have been, it was horrible enough as it was, because we were outside the little courtyard they had there, and I was walking around in circles and circles and circles. And the guy came out and just told Barry, anyway, not very well, but anyway, that his son had passed. And of course, I just lost it.
Mm-hmm.
I just crashed.
Right. So, which brings us to a really important point that I kind of wanted to focus on here is we're obviously facing a lot of, you're not the only parents who have faced such a tragedy. And, with overdose rates as high as they are, and losing so many kids to these kind of events.
And even suicide.
Right. There's obviously an increasing number of people having to walk your path here. So share with us, give us some insight, maybe, let us in a little bit on what was that journey like for y'all in terms of just going through the grief, going through the loss. What were the things you did that you really gained a lot from? What were the things that you felt like you wish you'd done differently?
Well, you ask, what was it like? It should be, what is it like?
Okay.
Because it continues.
Okay. Right.
Grief for me was, as most of y'all know, was very, very hard. I was in a deep, deep, dark depression. And I had great doctors, very caring doctors, psychiatrists, my family doctor. She was the world to me in trying to help me. But when you just feel like you don't want to live anymore, you don't want to take your life, but you just don't want to live anymore. You just don't want to be on this earth anymore. And I literally would sleep. I'd stay in bed. Barry'd come home at lunch. I'd be in bed. He'd go back to work. And then I'd get so aggravated because I knew when it got close to 5 o'clock, he was coming again. And I was going to have to get up. And anyway, that, I'd like to say went on just for weeks or months, but it went on for years. That grief process lasted. I did get out and go to church sometimes and go with a friend out to eat or something like that. But it was hard going to church because people kept coming up to you and I just couldn't handle the attention. And I didn't want to talk about it. So anyway, it was 4 years that I read a scripture. You do so much to try to help yourself through this process. Of course, you've got God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit there, right off. But there's a lot of times I just didn't feel them, being there. I definitely had a wonderful, loving, caring, faithful husband that stood by my side throughout this whole thing, putting aside his own grief to take care of me. And so that, I was blessed with that. I knew I had prayers from people all over, close friends, family, church people. And even though you know all this, it's hard. My biggest thing was Jeffrey in heaven. I'd always prayed I wanted Jeffrey to go to heaven. And I had to feel that. And I literally made a list of all the people. I even had an uncle who's a psychiatrist, and he gave me scriptures. He had a whole page full. We went up to his house, and he went through all about that, why Jeffrey is in heaven, and all the scriptures and everything. And I hung that on my mirror. So I knew it. I knew that that's where he was, but I didn't feel it. And I was reading scriptures, and I came across John 14, 1 through 3. And of course, the first, I'll just read it to you. It talks about Jesus saying that he'll, that do not let your heart be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. We're in my Father's house, mansion. There are many, many rooms. If it were not so, I wouldn't have told you. I'm going there to prepare a place for you. And of course, all this rang true to me because I had always concentrated on all that part. But then the next verse really popped me really good. It said, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back. I will take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. So right there at that point, I thought, Jesus came back. He got Jeffrey. So Jeffrey was not alone when he died. Jesus was there. He took him back to heaven to be with him.
Right.
And I actually felt that peace that is talked about in Philippians 4, 6,
Right.
that transcends all understanding.
Right.
Guard your heart and your mind. Right. I felt it. And I have since then. And that's what I needed. And I had read scriptures and studied scriptures, and I had read some of the things you asked, what do you do? And I had read books. Matt Lucado had a book about anxious for nothing, and I was totally anxious during that time. Anxiety was huge with me, so I read that book, and it was great for me, suggested by a roommate, my college roommate. And like I said, I delve into the scriptures and prayers from my friends and Christian books and songs meant a lot to me. But that scripture, it just opened up my eyes and my heart and gave me peace.
It's interesting the power of Scripture to do that. It's the right word at the right moment, just at the right time. You may have read over that verse.
Oh, I had. Probably
multitude of times.
Hundreds, thousands of times. Probably.
Right.
And I could tell you verses 1 and 2 what they said. Right. But that verse 3 never really sunk in. Right. Until that time, that day. And Jody, our minister, that poor guy, I would go to him, help me, give me something, give me peace and that kind of stuff. And he was just like, he was trying all kinds of things, and things he would tell me. But I remember that was on a Monday, and that Wednesday night I went up to him before church started. I said, "Come here." I called him out to the lobby and said, "I need to tell you something." And I thought he's going, "Oh no, what does she want this time?" And I read that verse to him, and I said, "He's with Jesus. And Jesus came and got him, and I know he's there. And so I just wanted to let you know I'm at peace. And he was just like, finally, yay, finally, you know. So, like I said, I had a page full of people that had told me that over and over, but
Right.
I had to feel it.
Right. So when you hit that moment, then, I mean, does the switch just flip and it's like I'm completely different at that point? Or is it kind of I went down into this gradual depression, I have to kind of climb my way back out of it? How does that work?
It flipped.
Okay.
Barry will tell you, he told me this, that he had prayed over and over and over again, Lord, please bring me back my old Vicki. I want my old Vicki back. And he said he noticed from that point on that instead of getting the old Vicki back, he got a better version, and he calls it the 2.0 Vicki.
Okay.
That I'm just doing so much better that it's been a blessing.
Good.
A blessing.
Well, so I know, I mean, I remember that part of the journey well because Barry, you'd be out here a good bit and we would talk and I'd always get updates on how's Vicki doing, how's Vicki doing. And usually they weren't particularly good reports.
And I got lots of prayers from y'all too. I know. Barry told me.
But when that happens, I mean, I know it's great to have not just the old Vicki back, but Vicki 2.0. What do you do? Where do you go? Because you can be so caught up in taking care of you. First of all, you're kind of getting through the Jeffrey thing, and now you're taking care of her.
Right.
But what about you?
You know, one of the things that is discussed in grief recovery is getting stuck.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe I was stuck in my grief. I just think it was delayed.
Uh-huh.
And this past year, 2022 was probably the hardest year for me through this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
2020, we had COVID, so we were together. She had risen from the dead. She'd come back.
Had her
Good,
day before.
good Easter comment. Yeah.
She had risen from the dead for me, and she was back. And then COVID hit, and we had a year of isolation, basically. And in 2021. And we were pretty much just kind of putting our lives back together, getting back with family. And I began to volunteer again out here. Vicki felt safe and let me out of the house. And then in sometime, I guess in late 21, I began to sink into a state of depression. I just didn't want to do anything and realized what was going on, that I was grieving. And so I talked to people about it, talked to our minister about that, and sat down with him a couple of times or a few times. And I guess that toward the end of the year, just after Christmas, I decided that I may need to go back to Grief Share.
Mm-hmm.
Grief Share is a grief recovery program that we were part of. So we went back to Grief Share.
Our third time around.
Okay.
The very first time we went, like the January when Jeff died in December,
Mm-hmm.
that really didn't, I couldn't grasp any of that.
Right,
You know?
right.
So we went back the next year,
Mm-hmm.
and that was more helpful.
Help. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then
we
went.
were just, it's 3 months, of 2 hours
Mm-hmm.
once a week, and it was very good.
So it was helpful.
Good. So with everything going on, all that you've all went through, where I realize this journey isn't a past tense thing, it's an ongoing thing. Where do you find yourself today in that journey?
Well, today, step back to 2018, I was able to retire. And I did not want to retire to nothing. So I think you'll recall I came down here and talked with you, and you suggested I just come hang out with the guys. So starting in September 2018, I came down and we kind of hung out with the guys for morning devotional, 7 a.m. And then your class started at 9, and then I began teaching a class here at 11 o'clock. And so I was pretty involved here.
4 days a week.
In 21.
Mm-hmm.
And well until COVID hit, March of 20. And then again in 21, I started back up. So today, I still have moments that I suffer. I just go into a spot that I can't seem to work my way out of. At one time, I was able to just say, well, that's enough of that. Move on, and I could move on, and I would move on. Now it has gotten to the point where it had got to the point where it was affecting my behavior, affecting my life, and so that's why I decided to go back to Grief Share. Today, I'm in pretty good shape. There are certain triggers that I try to avoid. I know they're there, and so I try to avoid those things. This was a big step for me. I think we talked about this some time ago, and I told you, well, Vicky's ready, but I'm not. Right. And I think that I'm at a place now where I'm able to be among people better. For a while I was just so terrified that someone would ask me about how I'm doing, because I didn't want to answer that question.
Right.
And so I'm pretty good right now. Right. I'm good.
Actually, on that line, a couple of weeks or so before, he said he wanted to do this. We just talked about it a little bit, and I let it go. I didn't say anything. And then after we finished our last night at Grief Share, he said, well, have you called Tom yet? And I went, you're ready? And he said, yeah, I want us to do it. And I said, okay. So then I called you. I wanted to go back just one step. Yeah. One thing I did not mention, well, I mentioned it, but one thing that really touched me was songs. I literally have a journal of songs that help me, that I've written down because they helped me in all that time I was going through a chair.
That's awesome.
But the main song that really gave me a lot of peace was, it came out in 2017, was Home by Chris Tomlin. And then along that line, Jeffrey, I found out through some ones that worked here with Jeff at Saving Way, that the song Breathe by Johnny Diaz, that he loved it when it came on. He wanted them to turn it up, and he would sing it out loud the whole way. So I knew. So those two songs meant so much to me.
Right.
And in the song Home, we were on, my mother lives in Georgia, and was on our way through Gurley to see my mother. And this was before you could select your own music. You had to listen to the radio. And that song Home came on. And we were somewhere in Gurley. And the first time I'd heard it, great words. And so anyway, we go visit, and we come back. And on our way back, at almost that exact location, that song comes on again. Wow. And even Barry said, that's eerie, right. But that's cool. Right. It's like a sign. Right. But I just wanted to read, if you don't mind, just a few words from this song. It's, this world is not what it was meant to be. All this pain, all this suffering, there is a better place waiting for me in heaven. Every tear will be wiped away, every sorrow and sin erased. We'll dance on seas of amazing grace in heaven, I'm going home. Where the streets are golden, every chain is broken, I want to go. Where every fear is gone, I'm in your open arms where I belong. I want to go home. Then it says, I lay down my burdens, I lay down my past. I run to Jesus, no turning back. Thank God Almighty, I'll be free at last in heaven. I'm going home. And then it repeats some of those things. And it comes down and says, the dead will rise on the shores of eternity. The trumpet will sound, the angels will sing, hallelujah, hallelujah. And it goes back, I'm going home. Where every fear is gone. I'm in your open arms where I belong. I'm going home. And those words just are precious to me.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And I know your story, I know it's helpful for you to share it, and I've certainly been blessed by hearing your journey and obviously walking with you through some of it. And I know our viewers and listeners today are blessed for you to share with them, because many of them are, or unfortunately in some cases will be, facing these challenges.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, I was going to ask, is there anything else you would like to share as we wrap it up today?
Thank you. Yes, I would like to add that God, I know, was working in my life, even during those dark, dark days, as Barry refers to them, even though I didn't feel it. But Jesus' light was shining through and covering up that darkness. Little at a time, his light was coming through. Even during COVID, when when my heart still continued to heal, Barry and I think finally were able to, even though we was together 24/7, we were able to actually start building our relationship together again and healing, and it was growing stronger and stronger. So we have been blessed with a better marriage with that. And I just thank you for having us.
Thank you.
One of the things I wanted to address is the such an increased number of families who are burying their children,
Right.
because of this epidemic of fentanyl and other things that are taking our kids away from us. And I wanted to just sort of my opinion of some things that were helpful to me. One of the things that I wrote down 5 things here. One of them was lean into your faith, trust God. This is, I've heard it so many times. It's not normal for us to bury our kids.
Right.
It is not.
Right.
And so it's a very hard thing. It's a very hard thing to do. It's a very hard thing to go through. One of the things I wanted to just lean into God, lean into your faith. Trust that God will pull you through. One of the things I talk with these guys about when I talk to them, so many of them get to a point where they finally admit that the only way that they're going to get out of this addiction is for God to help them, because nothing else has worked.
Right. Right.
And that's I agree with that with grief.
Right.
And, that God is basically the only thing that's going to pull you through.
Right.
Is your trust in Him. Community. I cannot emphasize how important community was for me, especially my faith community. I had brothers who would text me out of the blue. I don't know how they knew I needed it, but somehow they would text me out of the blue, and we'd go to lunch, or we just chat for a minute on the phone or something like that. So
You had several that would call and take me to lunch or to breakfast.
I had that, had that community. I think that was so important for me. A good grief recovery program. I've talked to so many people who just tried to do this on their own,
Right.
and it just doesn't work. It just
It didn't work for us.
Generally speaking, it didn't work. It did not work for me. I can tell you that. We did Grief Share, which is a program that several churches around Huntsville to do it, and it worked. It's a good program. It's a good program. Watch for triggers. Have a plan. Holidays are hard. Sometimes Mondays are hard. It just, it's kind of like the old adage: grief is like standing on the beach at the ocean, and you have all these waves come up, and they're just kind of nice little waves, but then there's all of a sudden that one wave that knocks you off your feet. And that's what grief is like.
Right.
It really is. And the last thing I think is understand that people want to help. Let them. We shut out people that just kind of, it's I don't know, it's in probably part of our male DNA to do it yourself.
Right.
And I think it's just important that people want to help. Let them help. Yeah. And just be aware of that, isolation will just destroy you.
Right. That's great. And letting people help is part of building that community, right? Because sometimes we develop a community around us serving, but we don't really build a community around people serving us. Right. And learning how to do that is an important part of the community building process.
And I think how these things relate to addiction recovery as well. Community,
right.
And the staying away from isolating yourself,
right.
Plugging into your faith.
Right.
So these things, I think they also work in grief recovery.
Right. That's great. Well, Barry, Vicki, thank you for coming and sharing with us. I'm thankful you're a special part of our family, and look forward to you continue to be a part of the family for a long time to come. So thank you. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
And thank you today for listening and watching Recovery His Way. If you'd like to know more about the His Way program, you can check out our website at hiswayinc.org.